All right, we've gone closer and closer. Let's reach ultimate object-oriented programming in JavaScript. We have our constructor functions that, well, were a little funny. Nobody really liked the prototype ways of adding methods. So with ES6, JavaScript finally got the class keyword. Object-oriented programming was created with the class idea in mind, a class being a blueprint of what we want created. Let's see how this works. With the new ES6 classes, we can now do this. We have the elf class that we just simply define like that. And then we have a constructor. And then the constructor is something that gets run every time we instantiate or use the new keyword on a class. So this goes inside over here, and we take in the name and weapon parameter. Now, the beauty with classes is that, as object-oriented programming suggests, we want to keep all our functionality inside of this box. All the properties, all the state, all the methods, all the actions together in a nice contained environment, a class, an object. So instead of having these in a separate location, I can now just simply add a tag in here as part of our class, and this method can now act upon our state. So I can just return right here. And I can get rid of this ugly prototype. How nice and easy was that? Let's see if this works. If I click run, look at that. It's all working. How much cleaner is that? And if you're coming from an object-oriented programming language like Java or C++, this is going to look really familiar to you. And this is the true beauty of object-oriented programming. We're modeling real-life scenarios. We're creating an elf class that is a blueprint of what we want elves to be like. Well, elves have names, they have weapons, and they can act upon these properties like attack or build. And we can just keep adding things here. And we have one location that holds this entire elf object. And anytime we need to update something or change or add a method, we can just change it in here, and all the instances of the elf will get that update. Now, I keep saying this word instance, and this is a common term that you'll hear a lot when it comes to object-oriented programming and when we use classes. An instance happens when we call this class and create an object out of this class. So for example, Peter is an instance of elf. For example, if I do console.log and do Peter, and luckily for us, JavaScript has instance of, then do elf. If I click run here, I get true. Peter is an instance of elf. So is Sam. But if I do elf instance of Peter, I'll get false. Because, well, it's the other way around. So instance of is this language that we can use in object-oriented programming to say we're creating an instance of a class. This, with the new keyword, is called instantiation. We're instantiating a class. If I remove the keyword from here, the new keyword, and I click run, I see that class constructor elf cannot be invoked without new. We even get a nice error saying, hey, we need new here. Don't forget new, which is really, really nice. All right, everybody, cheers, get up, throw your chairs, throw your laptops. All right, don't throw your laptops. But we finally have classes. We finally have object-oriented programming in JavaScript, right? Well, not really. You see, this is what we call syntactic sugar. Underneath the hood, in JavaScript, we're still using prototypal inheritance. We're not using classes like classes work in other languages. This is the closest that JavaScript is going to get to classes. Underneath the hood, they're still using the new keyword with the prototype. And you're thinking to yourself, whoa, why didn't we just, all this trouble, why didn't we just create classes from the beginning in JavaScript? Wouldn't it just make everything easier? Now, as we'll find out, classes aren't necessarily the answer to everything, as we'll see when we get to functional programming. But also, there's an interesting story or quote behind why JavaScript doesn't have classes. This is a quote from the creator, Brendan Eich of JavaScript. If I had done classes in JavaScript back in 1995, I'd have been told that it was too much like Java, or that JavaScript was competing with Java. And I was under the marketing orders to make it look like Java, but not make it too big for its britches. So the interesting thing was that Brendan Eich was tasked with creating a language that would attract Java developers that were really used to classes and object-oriented programming concepts. But at the same time, they wanted to create a competing language. And for marketing purposes, they couldn't make it the exact same. So he had to be creative. So he used prototypal inheritance, which is quite different from how classes work in languages like Java and C++. In other languages, classes are an actual thing. In JavaScript, classes are still just objects. Everything in JavaScript is an object. So in an interview, if you get asked, hey, does JavaScript have classes? Well, yes, they do, as syntactic sugar, but class keyword is still just prototypal inheritance. And some people call this pseudo-classical inheritance because it's not real classical inheritance. Looking at this, I hope you see how we've gone from repetitive code that was harder and harder to maintain to something that's a little bit more organized. We've created this grouping of functionality so that it's easier to maintain and extend. By the way, you may be asking yourself, why don't we just add a tag to the constructor? Why do we just put it outside over here? And this is actually a very interesting question that you might get in an interview. You see, every time we use the new keyword and create or instantiate a class, the constructor function gets run. Because this constructor function needs to get run because each elf has a unique name and perhaps a unique weapon. But attack is shared by all instances of the class. If we moved attack to the constructor, that's going to take up memory space, right? Instead of creating an attack function from each object, which is what we would do if we added to the constructor, and that's something that we've been trying to avoid, instead, we just have one function in one location that all these instances can access. So there you have it. I hope you start to see the beauty in efficiency. Let's take a break and talk a little bit more about this in the next video. I'll see you in that one.